So, hey everybody, how are you doing? Today is a really special episode for Turban Thinker for a number of things. Most importantly, I don't usually do Zoom interviews, I usually do audio podcasts, but I felt that the energy was just too dynamic with me and my guest to kind of hide that. So that's why I'm going to do a Zoom and audio, of course. But more importantly, maybe some of you sort of read my article on LinkedIn, I guess about a month ago now, where I talked about my OCD and how my journey has been. I mean, it was like a 3-minute video of, telling the world I'm really proud of the OCD that I am and sort of sharing that. And it was overwhelming. I didn't expect the response that I was going to get when I did share that from other people who suffered from OCD, and supporters and people were, oh, now we understand why you're the way you are. So, it was really interesting to see that response. And during the article, of course, people were commenting, and, I guess they say the rest is history. My guest made a comment, I connected to her, and wow, what an incredible person I came across. And so today, a beautiful person who's joining me is Catherine Benfield. And Catherine is, a fellow, I don't want to say like a fellow sufferer, because you know what? We're not fellow sufferers. We're fellow champions and ambassadors and heroes. So she's a very, very, very intelligent, super excitable, so passionate individual. And Catherine is a producer, and it's really interesting because a lot of our conversations centered around two things. One was she's currently produced a remarkable film, which is sort of touring the festival circuit, called Waving. And she also runs an OCD website, Taming Olivia, which, she has built over the years to sort of help recovery, bring compassion and kindness into that process, and really support others who are, other heroes like ourselves. So today it's a two-way conversation with myself and Catherine. And so Catherine, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy you're here. And it was a long intro, but I needed to get it out.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honoured. Like, I'm always so, I've done a lot of advocacy over the past 10 years really now, or just under that. And, every now and again you come across someone who's brand new to the community, has an amazing voice and can just like reach so many people. And that was you. And I mean, I don't often comment actually on LinkedIn posts. I very rarely do. Very, very rarely. And I couldn't help it with this one, because I could just tell that, what you were saying was really going to reach people. And I was so thrilled. I'm always so glad, that people
thank you
trying to spread the word, as it were, particularly people who aren't already as part of our, OCD community, and people who are known to us, who speak out about it. So welcome.
Well, I'm really excited to be part of the community. Absolutely. I'm so happy. And I'm really happy to have met you, of course. And I mean, the conversations we've been having for the last few weeks, every time we touch base, it's like so exciting. So let's just kind of strip it back. And the first question I'm going to ask you is, from your perspective, can you define what OCD is?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's hardest to kind of talk about with OCD is that it can be just such a complicated subject. But OCD is basically an anxiety disorder. But there's something very specific about this anxiety disorder in that it tends to happen in a loop. So OCD will have obsessions, which can be intrusive thoughts, worries, fears, urges, and things that go against the value of the person. They really upset the person, and they could be anything really. But you'll find a heightened state of anxiety as a result. And there will then be the compulsion, which is the action, or that can be mental or physical, to try and lessen that anxiety, to try and take you back down again. So, the trope, the stereotypical trope, is someone feeling worried about germs, going off washing their hands. But it could also be someone worrying about deliberately hurting someone else, and then trying to review memories as a way of looking for reassurance that they're not likely to do it. And then what happens is, because OCD is not a quiet voice, if you're
no, it certainly isn't.
It most certainly isn't. If your compulsion then works a little bit to lower that anxiety, OCD doesn't like it. It's like, that's not what I'm here to do. I want you to get worried. So it tends to up the ante. And so you'll find that you enter into a spiral then of just going around this loop. And that's how, people can start with having OCD to the point where it's, it's detrimental. They can't do anything, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's crippling, right? It takes over your life, and absolutely you end up in a state, you know, where you can't. It's a perpetual cycle, right? It is. It's a perpetual cycle.
It just goes on and on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, and the D is so important. You know, so many of the charities and that talk about this. It's like, you know, a lot of people will have obsessions and compulsions. You know, there's different types of people in the world, but the D stands for disorder. And that is, it's impacting you on your day-to-day life. Are you doing it a certain amount of hours a day? Is it distressing you? Is it getting worse? All of those criteria go into making it a disorder. Yeah. That is not enjoying tidying, you know?
I mean, I think that was I guess that's what got the response when I put it out there, because, you know, so many people refer to it so lightly. You know, I see programs on TV and I hear people talk, and people kind of throw, oh yeah, I'm OCD because I happen to be really organized or really clean, or, you know, so that reference for me over the years is, I guess, what was grinding, because of course there's a component absolutely of cleanliness and that repetitiveness and, you know, the organizational thing, but, you know, far deeper is the issue, right? And the one that I think the response when I got, the one that people didn't realize, is the intrusive thoughts. They are so, you know, it's such from the outside, like I said, it's almost to people just about that repetitiveness, but not the intrusiveness. And so, you know, and that is what is the crippling part, right? Yeah, because, you know, the actions, like you said, are to dumb it down, but actually, you know, to manage that side of it, you know, is something that, well, people aren't aware of, as a matter of fact. You know, that's the biggest thing. They don't realize it's not just a cleanliness disorder. It's not an organizational disorder. I wish it was, you know, it's not. It's that constant experience.
It can be anything, can't it? I've seen people say things like, you know what, OCD isn't about organizing your socks in your sock drawer. But the thing is, it could be. If it fits the criteria of OCD, where, you know, you are doing that to try and lessen the anxiety that is coming because of obsession. You know, if you believe that by doing that, you are protecting your loved ones, and if you're doing it for 8 hours a day, yes, that is OCD, you know. So again, it's not what you're doing as such, it's why you're doing it, and whether it's part of that process, you know. And it's so debilitating. People just don't realize. That's why we're always thrilled when more and more people talk about it.
And what was really I guess fascinating for me is when you said that you were OCD at 5, right? But it took you until you were 32 to be sort of, I guess, professionally diagnosed, you know. So that's a crazy amount of time. For me, I kind of knew it when I was 14. I was very aware of it. To be at such an early age, and then to sort of continue that until you're 32. So that's crazy. How was that?
Awful. It was awful. And you know what? I'm not alone there. I can't remember the latest official stat, but I often see it written that it takes something like 18 years for people to get a diagnosis. And a lot of that is because of stigma and misunderstanding of the condition, because I didn't.
Yes.
So I kind of had an idea I had OCD. So I used to do a lot of, I used to worry that my parents, something was going to happen to them, you know, and like that was my anxiety. I used to get these horrible intrusive thoughts about car crashes and stuff.
Yeah.
To try and lessen the anxiety, you know, some things made sense. I used to go and check the cooker, you know, kind of it didn't make sense how often I did it. But then other times things didn't make any sense. You know, I used to wait at the window willing them home, you know, kind of going through these sentences in my head trying to get them to come home. I suppose deep down knew that wouldn't actually make sure they got home, you know, but that's what I used to do. And so I kind of, at some point when I grew up, I remember watching when I was about 15, some kind of program about OCD, and someone was washing their hands a lot and flicking switches, and because I'd done a couple of bits of that, because I was quite I did quite a lot of switching, like flick switching, I thought, oh, maybe I do have OCD. And so I could say to myself, there are bits of me that is OCD. But, you know, it kind of came and went. It was never serious enough for me to get help. Or if it did get serious enough for me to get help, I'd start down the route of getting help, and then I would feel better and just not go through with it, you know. And then that was the cycle that I kept up. But when I had my son, that's where I started getting these really awful intrusive thoughts about harm coming to him. And just like OCD does, you know, like I said, with the cycle, it started off with me worrying about having chemicals in the house, and gradually got worse to someone hurting him, to me being the one to hurt him. And that I didn't know was OCD because no one was talking about intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I got extremely ill, like, I mean, physically ill as a result of that. But I mean, it was awful. So like, I kind of changed to having, I would have intrusive thoughts, and the way that my compulsions would be things like making sure I was never in the same room with him. You know,
yeah, I get it.
Because my husband, you know, had to leave work for a while to come and support me so that he could look after our baby and stuff like that. It was massive. And it was only when I went to the hospital and I was like, I'm a danger, remove me, you know, just put me somewhere, I need to be sectioned or something, that people actually kind of started talking about OCD. Had no idea that's what it was, you know. I Googled it and that's what came up. So although I did know of OCD and I knew that there were elements in my behaviour that was probably OCD, I didn't realise, I thought it was just the checking. I didn't realise in the compulsions, I didn't realise there was that whole obsessional component to it. It threw me. I mean, you imagine living your life for that many years thinking you're a monster, you know, you're just like, you control these thoughts, you can't make them go away. And
I can't imagine, because I've
lived of course you can. Of course I mean, you're listening to it, but you're talking to someone who
I mean, who totally, of course, relates to that. And I think what's, you know, for me, certainly, because it's juggling, right? Because you know, it's trying to, like I said, we're almost, you know, the superheroes of our own personality is how I see it, because there's the one that's trying to give you an ordinary life or a normality, but then you're fighting against this power, right? That's kind of controlling and taking over. And because I find that you have, I don't know, a heightened sense of awareness. I don't know, from my perspective, which is why I guess everything then becomes so exaggerated, because, you know, actually, you know, for me in my journey, it was my career that helped me survive that madness, right? And helped me cope with that intrusiveness. So talk to me about, you know, taming Olivia, because obviously you're learning about it, and then you've sort of now dedicated, I guess, your journey to helping others who have it and creating that environment or that safe zone. So how did that start, and why the character? I'm intrigued.
I think I had the most amazing therapist, I must say. She was absolutely incredible, and I had a lot going on in my life alongside OCD. You know, I lost both of my parents and stuff, so I was really up against it. I mean, I look back now and I just think, how on earth did I get through it? And as a result, there were a few sticking points to my recovery. And like, as you say, people with OCD, you know, the OCD is the really negative and awful side, but then there are also these amazing, you know, creative, you know, I haven't met a single person with OCD who isn't just ridiculously creative. I mean, we've got to be creative to come up with these horrendous intrusive thoughts, haven't we? You know, so
exactly.
I think recovery was helping me start to realise that actually there was another side to me, and that actually maybe some personality traits that some studies have said might mean you're more susceptible to having OCD. Some of those personality traits actually might be really strong in me, and maybe I could use them as a positive. And I was reading the work of John Hirschfield, actually. He's a psychotherapist in America. He's amazing. And he talks a lot about, you know, how amazing people with OCD are. And, you know, and I loved it. It was the first time
we are.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the first time I ever thought, oh my goodness, you know, it's worth me liking myself, you know. Maybe there's some really good things about me. And so that was happening. And I was also, so I was reading a lot of his. I was doing a lot of work on self-compassion, but I was also just really stuck with this idea that I wasn't these thoughts. You know, I'd had loads of therapy, I'd read loads of books, and it was like, yeah, but how do I know I'm not this person? How do I know that I'm... And I just couldn't get it in my head that actually, deep down, secretly, I did want to do these things that I was fearing and stuff. And I just couldn't get rid of it. And I remember thinking, you know, I was working, there's an artist called Sean Shinnock in America, and he does a load of art, and I was like, look how creative he is, you know, maybe I could write stuff and things like that. It was just absolutely amazing. He has OCD too, he's incredible. And I remember kind of thinking, maybe I should do something like that. And I'd already created this little drawing, this little character to represent OCD. Just for me, it was like a way of me kind of going, all right,
separating.
Yeah, it's like I was trying to work on self-compassion for myself, and I was like, I can't do it for myself. However, what I can do is try and practice it for someone else. I was a mother, I was a teacher. It was like, right, let me see if I can practice. And so Olivia was designed to separate me from my condition. She was designed to, you know, so if these awful thoughts came in, I could just kind of imagine how I would react to something small and vulnerable. It was like how to respond with compassion and how to see it wasn't me, it was just something that I was dealing with right now. And because, you know, it was something, my husband does the illustration, and so we worked together, we created her. She was deliberately designed to kind of reference OCD, you know, ears for listening out for trouble, big like kind of feet so she can run away, you know, that classic compulsion.
Interesting, yeah.
Big eyes that she could see, you know, trouble coming and stuff like that. And there were two parts. There was one of her designs when she was just kind of being her normal self. But then there was also, and this was one of the most important parts of Olivia, there was another part of her that was just, you know, decrepit. There's another vision of her. I'm not sure if you've ever seen her, but she's just in pieces. She's tatty. She's got these long nails. And that was to help me get through really severe relapses. I thought, you know what, if I'm supposed to be creative, let me just try and use it in this way that might help me. And it just did really, really well. I brought out a blog. I wrote a blog. I'd never written anything in my life since school.
Yeah.
I tried to explain how she worked for me, just in the hope she might help a couple of people. And it grew very quickly, you know, it just, people seemed to resonate with it. I heard from a lot of people talking about how it really helped their children. And not just for OCD, but for other conditions, you know, it's like a lot of mental illness is to do with shame. You know, you have this layer of self-doubt and hatred on top of it because, you know, you can't get rid of this thing yourself or sometimes. And so people were finding it really helpful for all sorts of different conditions, and it just grew, you know, it just grew.
And so how has that sort of helped you? I mean, you're channeling a lot through, you know, little Olivia. You know, so that's really interesting because did it help you? Did it really help you separate and be able to kind of dump that stress on this little character and have to be the grown-up, I guess, in some way, right?
I suppose it was playing like that. Someone almost said it's like she's a representation of the inner child.
The good thing is over the last few years how prominent it has become. Mental health has been, you know, something that people can talk about more freely. And of course, you know, when I read the stats, we're talking about just under 1 billion people a year, you know, suffer mental health. And what's really even more fascinating for me is obviously we know sort of the vulnerable age is between 14 to 24. And that's where, you know, a lot of mental health really kicks off. But I was speaking to somebody a little while ago whose wife is in the profession of mental health. And she was saying, or he was actually saying, that they're, you know, now they're coming in the door at 6 years old. And actually it does start from that early on, but it kind of, I guess, accelerates between 14. And what's really difficult is in the past, you know, it's such a fascinating space because 14 to 24 is at your most vulnerable and at your most conscious of yourself and everything that's going on. So that is a very difficult. And then, you know, fast forward today, I mean, in my time, you know, 14 to 24 is a very different space than what 14 to 24 is today, where you have social media and those pressures of having to conform and look amazing and be amazing and live a lifestyle and own everything and be beautiful and have the perfect smile. So that, you know, when I was growing up, you had a magazine, you had television, and you kind of, you know, you aspired to be Cindy Crawford and you saw her once in a while if you know, happen to read something. Now it's like it's everywhere. So I can't even comprehend how much more difficult it is with that added layer of trying to fit in and conform and be perfect. When actually the reality is, I speak to a lot of influencers, those who in a public eye seem to be perfect. And those are the ones, actually, quite a lot of them are OCD sufferers, and quite a lot of them are the ones hiding behind this mask. So the irony, what I'm saying, it's like this, it's really quirky because on the outside, you know, you're portraying something, on the inside, you're very, very different. But then, of course, that's influencing all of this youth. And now when you're talking about, you know, 6 and 5, like you, when you started, very similar. You know, so we're very grateful that fast forward at the same time, you know, the last few years of I guess the stress that the pandemic brought onto everyone I guess accelerated mental health. And so kind of pushed it out to the forefront, and we're able to now have these conversations, right? It's so difficult to explain to someone when I try to explain to them, because it's not physical. And trying to explain something that is mental and visual, and the mind is just an incredible place, Catherine. I mean, wow, if you let it run, wow.
Yes,
You know,
yes.